Brilliant. So Simon, thank you so much for making the time for me today. I appreciate it. Obviously, it's great to chat to you after we met at UCLan a few months ago, just before the break. How have you been relaxing? You don't seem to be the type of person, do you get time to chill out? Do you get time to relax outside of work? What kind of, how do you do downtime? Is it possible for you?
I do get to relax because the team that I have, have been we've assembled a fantastic team over the last 5 years since we set up Planet Sport as a business. So a lot of the people, especially on the editorial publishing division, which I run, a lot of people that I've brought in myself. So I've recruited them. So people that I trust. And as head of publishing, if someone writes something and we get in trouble, that's on me. I take the bullet. So we do give students and young writers an opportunity, but we invest in them and mentor them a lot before they're sort of self-publishing on our websites, because it's very, you need them to understand law and stuff like that. So, but because I've got such a good team that work for me, a bit like a football manager, you manage that team, and then at some point you have to just let them go out on the pitch and let them express themselves without me sort of like micromanaging them. So yeah, I had a wonderful Christmas break. I did work a lot because it doesn't stop. Sport never stops.
No, yeah.
So it's pretty relentless. But I had a couple of days off. That's all I need. I love my job. So
Yeah.
And we're all set up. The one thing the pandemic has done, it's made everyone get absolutely au fait with Zoom and Teams and Google Hangouts. So you can break off for an hour on Christmas Day and have a chat with someone. So you can have that quality family time, but you're at home literally all the time. So
Yeah.
It might be that we all work long days, but I give all of my writers, all of my staff, the same flexibility that I have, which is like, we kind of work out how does your working day look for you? How does it fit around your school run and your kids and feeding them? And so quite a lot of us work a long day, but with lots of breaks in between, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think that's really cool. And one of the things that does come across, when you speak to yourself and when you see you, talking to students, is that passion that you've got, whether you're working or whether you're, like, obviously you've got a background in sport, but you've got a real love for it. And that does come across. And I want to get you to take me back, if you can, to where that love for all this came from, all these working hours, all the extra work you're doing now. You say you love it. You've just said that. So tell me about where that love comes from. Take me back to the very first moment you fell in love with sport.
So yeah, sport was. I was quite fortunate, really. I knew I wanted to be a writer from quite an early age. That was, at school, I loved English above anything else. Pretty much tanked at maths, science, anything that wasn't creative or writing, and not very good at art either. So quickly established that writing and making stuff up, and I'm a children's author. I've self-published a couple of children's books as well. So just the whole creative process, the work ethic's there, but the creative process. And if I buy a CD and listen to an album, I'm thinking about the engineers, the producers, all of that. I love that creative process. If you watch Cobra Kai, I like to think about that someone came up with that idea. Let's redo the Karate Kid for the new generation. And I can sit and watch that with my teenage sons, and I'm getting something totally different out to what they're getting out of it. I just love that process. But from a work ethic, that just comes. It's quite hard because it's not there in a lot of students, but the ones that have it are the ones that I employ. That I go and do a lot of talks at universities, and I like to think that I come across as quite a passionate person that's underpinned by the same values that someone was looking for 20 years ago when they came and did a talk to me at university. I feel like I stood out from the crowd because I was willing to accept that I'm at the bottom of the rung. I need to learn, but I'll work hard. Show me what to do and I'll work hard. So that's what I'm looking for when I go to universities. And we've just taken on 3 new full-time hires in January, which has taken us over 100 journalists in our network.
Mate, congratulations.
Which is just a bit of a moment, actually. I had a real moment of like, wow, and most of them are people that I've employed through placement schemes, and we've got quite a clear path on Planet Sport. In fact, I'm going to try and put something together to formalize it, call it the Planet Sport Academy, because there is a path,
Mm.
which is do a placement with us. If you do well, you go onto our freelance team and we pay you to do freelance work for us while you're at uni, which suits them because they've got lectures to attend.
Yeah.
But, you know, weekends and evenings, they're all just sat looking at TikTok. So I was like, we might as well do that, but there's some money for me doing it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It gives them an opportunity as well. One of the things that does come across to me certainly is that students, you know, there is a lack of paid opportunities for students. There's a lot of, you know, in our culture, in journalism, in the media, there is a free work culture still. It was the same 10 years ago, and it's still the same now. And someone like yourself really stands out because you're offering paid opportunities. And I like to feel the same way, you know, about Soundsphere and what we do. It's paramount because, you know, there needs to be that value there. They need to feel value, you know. I think that's from my perspective anyway.
Yeah, I think so. I think, don't get me wrong, we run a huge amount of placements, but maybe for 10 placements that we run, we might find 2 people that we'll take through to the freelance pool, because some work, some have got the right attitude, some haven't, and it is all about your attitude. I go into this with my eyes wide open because I know what I was like when I was a second year at university. I only really cared about, you know, girls and drinking and you know, but I was underpinned by knowing where I wanted to go in my career, but also have that fluidity of just, I mean, I did a straight journalism degree. I didn't do a sports journalism degree. They weren't really available then, but that was to give me flexibility to be able to write for anyone that wanted me to write for them. But that, yeah, it's quite hard to, you know, I've got 2 sons and one of them's 16, and you know, when I was 16, it's very hard not to hark back to what we were like. But you know, I was out working as a dishwasher in a hotel kitchen and doing a milk round and earning, and because my parents didn't have enough money to give me money, so I had to earn my own money, and that sets you up for life, I think.
Of course, man. That graft, that yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's important there. And you know, you mentioned about, you know, what students can learn from you, and I think one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, you know, taking me back to that start when you started out in journalism and with that passion for sport. What's the biggest thing you've learned about yourself from that point until now? What was the biggest, or some of the biggest things you've learned about yourself as a person, you know, through your career?
I think it's to like find out what your strengths are and focus all your energy on that. You know, it's very hard to say you can do everything. You know, I go there, I come into students and I say to them, I want you to do everything. I want them to believe they can do everything because they don't know what their strengths are. I know that my strengths are, you know, I'm not a brilliant features writer. And I'm more of a news journalist. So I employ fantastic writers, novelists to fill that gap. But then it's that acceptance that they can't do what I can do, which is knit projects together. You know, go and get a graphic designer, get a developer, get a journalist, take them out to the pub with 100 quid in my pocket, and, you know, create that environment, and then just tell them kind of what I want, but then give them that creative freedom to go and do what they, you know, I'm not a graphic designer, so I'm not going to tell you how I want it to look. You know, you're the features writer, so tell me what sort of content we should do. Let people, you know, do what they're good at. But that's I think that's quite a skill, knitting all those things together. That's it's just that acceptance of that is quite a skill set of mine, rather than just something that I can do.
Yeah, the networker, the one that brings the glue that holds it all together, which is clearly what you've been doing with Planet Sport. So, you know, and again, to get 100, you know, nearly 100 journalists there, you've glued all that together, mate. And I think that's a wonderful example.
Yeah, and that's we were going to go on to this, but that's where, you know, I'm a head of publishing, so I'm responsible for what we write, but I have to be able to work with the adults team, and I have to work with the development team and have an understanding of their world. I don't need to be able to work or build a website, but I have to have an understanding of the challenges they're facing to be able to sort of like knit it all together. So there's been a real team effort. You know, I've got a fantastic managing director who trusts me on the recruitment side of things, and he's very commercially savvy. So I've learned lots of commercial stuff from him. And I've learned a lot, you know, a tough way from working for Sky Sports, which was a great experience. But working for a huge corporate did not suit me. I didn't like being told I couldn't do things.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the main reason why I left, because I wanted that independence
Yeah.
to be creative and create things quickly. One of the big things at Sky Sports, because it's so huge, you might have a brilliant idea, but it might take 2 years to bring it to conception because you've got to go through all these hoops. And that's very frustrating for a creative person that just wants to give something a go and see if it works.
And you what I'm hearing is you've got the freedom to not only do that for yourself, but also, again, provide that opportunity for other people, which is fantastic. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute as well, about your geographical location, which is interesting. But one of the things I wanted to ask you first is, a lot of these interviews are based around, and we will be asking for your advice and key tips for students shortly, but it's very positive, and I do love that. But I think mistakes get glossed over a little bit, and you're in a great position now. Again, you can come into the universities and students can admire what you do, and obviously a lot of people do admire on a global level what Planet Sport does. But I'd like to ask you about one of the biggest mistakes you've made in your career, if you're comfortable talking about it, and how you learned from that and how you overcame it, because I think it's important for to get that to make people realize that mistakes do happen, and they happen for everybody. It's not about dwelling on it, but not to lead the question, of course, but it's about to, kind of how you overcome it, how you work with it. So could you give me an example, if you're comfortable, of a mistake you made and how you overcame it?
Well, it's probably too many to be specific, but I think in the early rise of Twitter, kind of getting dragged into arguments with people on Twitter, that's been one of the big things that I've learned over the years from experience, that you've now got a real, and we talk to students about this a lot, you've got a real social responsibility as a journalist. You can't just go and say what you want on Twitter. There's a social footprint that you're leaving. Look at all of the people that said something 10 years ago and are now being dragged across the coals for what they said. But at that time, it might, poor Michael Vaughan, who knows if he said what he's being accused of said, but at that time, in that moment, it probably didn't. It was. Do you know what I mean? I can see why he's come out and said I didn't say it, but 3 people are saying he did. So, a few getting involved with a few Twitter warriors is something. But there's mistakes being made by everyone across the business and across the whole world, and you shouldn't worry about it. That's how you learn. You can't learn if you're not prepared to make mistakes and not beat yourself up about it. I think rushing is one thing I've rushed things too much, especially from a journalistic point of view. Maybe been waiting for a comment from someone and it's not coming, so I rush it out, and then you regret it because then it causes more problems. So just take your time. Don't believe everything you see on social media. That's one thing that I've done. You see. Over the years with experience, since, like you say, since Twitter came out, you would see something and I might create a piece of content around a tweet, and then you realize actually that's just some bloke in his bedroom, like there's no substance to it. That's something that I've really learned to, what is the source? Is it the BBC? Is it the police? Make sure it's a trusted source. But honestly, I mean, in general, I'm quite a positive person. So I believe in sort of redemptive training, which is something that my wife has. She's a primary school educator, and they do a lot of redemption because kids make loads of mistakes. So it's, rather than punishing, it's like, how do we make this better? So that's definitely how I view mistakes. If you've done something to upset a teacher and you've got a comment, how do you make it better? Like send her an apology, buy her a box of chocolates, just fix it rather than being punished for it. It's I'm not giving you anything specific there because I can't really think of any, but that's because I just turned 47 and I'm like Homer. Anything new that goes in pushes something out. So
it's really interesting that redemptive training, I think, can work not only for kids but adults as well.
Absolutely.
I think it's important, and I think that the social media point you make there is very, very useful. I've had young writers come in and they've got very incriminating tweets and they want to write a story, and I'm like, you could ruin someone, and it's so weird, isn't it? Someone could write something in a bedroom, like you mentioned, and that could ruin somebody's life, whether it's true or not. So I asked that person immediately, can you verify this source with a rep? What was it? They had 3 or 4 tweets, and I was thinking, if what is being said here will destroy this person if you put it anywhere. It doesn't matter whether it's a blog the size of 10 people or 2,000, it will still have an impact. And I think that's one of the things that's different now from say back in our day, back 10 15 20 years ago. You would have to really research, and you would have to be very sure before you put a copy out, a hard copy out of anything, whereas now it can be done.
It's immediate and it never ends, and that's one of the challenges we face, really. We're now at a point as a network where we're publishing articles from 7 in the morning, maybe 6 in the morning till 11 at night, and it just doesn't stop. And my challenge is to try and find a way to close that gap, to make it so we're 24 hours, because there's we have got a global approach. So we are thinking, well, if we're publishing articles at 9 o'clock, people in Asia can read that, or they wake up to an American audience can consume that. Let's write something for the Australian audience at this time. So it's never ending. And one of the big things that I'd always urge as well, it's so important for young people to look after themselves and make sure they spend some time away from their phone. I've got over 100 editors that are writing stories, running social channels. If I tried to keep an eye on everything, my head would explode. Yeah. So you have to have that mindfulness, don't you?
Absolutely, the mindfulness is really important, certainly. And I think before we talk about, you mentioned some of that global audience there, and there was discussion about where you want to go when I met you around doing more work in America. And before we talk about that, I'd like to talk about the fact you are based in Leeds now. Again, to go back, not trying to make either of us seem particularly old, but certainly a decade ago and beyond that, 80% of the industry, a little bit more than that, was down south, down in London. I was lucky enough to have my family split between London and Yorkshire, so I was able to stay on my distant relatives' couches and floors to do my internships and do 2 years down in London. To give me the skills and the internships, etc. And obviously you've been in Sky Sports and you've done all that stuff there. What was it like? What were the challenges of doing what you're doing now? Because again, it's a global platform, but doing it in Leeds, because again, for northern students who can't afford, and there are many, it's one of the reasons we set up, and I'm sure you've encountered it as well. A lot of the students coming from universities, they can't afford to do those internships and those placements and that free work we alluded to earlier. But again, there's that perception that if you're in London, you're doing all right, and if you're not, then you're doing it properly. And I've come up against that quite a few times in my career. So, what were the challenges of doing what you're doing in Leeds?
Well, I think first of all, it has to be said that the north of England has evolved massively since I moved to Leeds, which was 1997. Leeds was a great city then, but bear in mind I was at university at Preston, so a lot of my nightlife and weekends were spent at Liverpool, Blackpool, Preston, Blackburn, Bolton, just nights out all across the north. And I'm from the Midlands originally. I'm from a place called Lichfield in Staffordshire. Yeah. So I moved up to the north, and literally in those 3 years just fell in love with the north of England and the people and the warmth of the place, and it's really evolved. But just going back to your point specifically, Leeds itself has just become, for me, it's become the digital media capital of Europe. It's led the way. And yet it's a city that if you come to it as a city, it's up there with Milan and Rome, and it's a city that people come to. So it's got a bit of everything. It's got culture and galleries and, music venues, sports arenas. It's got everything, it's really vibrant. The way they laid it all out is very similar to New York. It's very grid-like, so it's easy to get around, where I feel like Manchester is more sprawling. If you go out in Manchester, you have to decide what area you're going to go in, because you can't easily get to another area.
I certainly enjoyed living and driving in Manchester more than I did driving around in Leeds in my student days. But aside from that, I get what you mean.
So I used to work for teamtalk.com, which was one of the first ever football websites that launched on the internet from the back of phone line. You used to have to ring up the phone lines that were advertised on the back of teletext, which is just, these are platforms that young students won't know what they are, like teletext. You're trying to explain what teletext was. And I worked for Teletext Sport, writing the content for teletext. So yeah, with the company I worked for, decided to relocate out of Leeds, and I just moved to Leeds, so I loved Leeds. And that was the Press Association. They were moving to Howden, out towards your way, like literally from Leeds to the middle of nowhere. It was how me as a 24-year-old saw it. So I just decided to look around for jobs in Leeds, got a job at Team Talk, helped grow that site and that network into a network of sites that were bought by Sky Sports for over £100 million. But at that time, that was kind of, I was part of a big team, but obviously a lot younger then. So then when Sky Sports pretty much decided to close down their Leeds editorial hub and said, if you want a job, you need to move to London. At that point, I just thought, I don't want to move to London. Like you're saying, I'd seen so much opportunity. I'd seen the growth of Leeds. So I just, I left, I took redundancy, set up my own little limited company, had 2 students, freelancers working with me. And that was the start of what we are now. Me just sat at home with a MacBook, taking a bit of a leap of faith, really.
Mate, that's wonderful too. That it started that way as well, because that's, that's how we started, but that's how a lot of young people are starting out. And again, I think what again, so long as you've got that experience and maybe, done a bit of research and maybe gone to work with someone like yourself, and got that experience of working with other people, setting up for yourself, it's possible now. So long as so long as, I always say, my rules are, don't be a dick and be good at what you do. That's those are my 2 rules for people.
I like that. I do like that. And I think that's important, actually, because a lot of people don't act the right way, and they're a bit full of themselves. And you have to be quite humble in this business and admit that there's going to be people that are better than you at certain things. But just be open to learning every day. I learn every day, and be collaborative as well. I think that's one of my main strengths. Planet Sport has been a collaborative process amongst a gang of people that like each other. So, we challenge each other, but in general, we've formulated a team, especially a strategy team, that, we've known each other for 20 years. We've all done different things. We can all bring something else to the table. We do have we have a head of strategy, a head of marketing, a head of commercial, head of publishing, head of social, and we all, talk, and we try to bring everything together. And you could do that at university. You could do that with your 5 best mates. You're all going to have different strengths, aren't you?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And before we talk about, again, there's a couple more questions, maybe 3 or 4 left. In terms of key tips, that you would give to any students, maybe three of what to do, and maybe 3 of what not to do, and what you want to see and what you don't want to see if someone comes to an interview with you. Could you give me some core tips and things that you've learned over the years that you would apply to other people?
Well, if I can speak specifically for Planet Sport, but me as a person as well, I'm looking for personality. I'm looking, whereas the BBC might not be looking for that, because they need someone they have to play with a straight bat, don't they? If they're sending someone out to do an interview with a BBC hat on, it has to be very straight. Whereas I'm looking for, if I send you to Silverstone to cover the British Grand Prix, I'm going to want you to get amongst the fans, have a drink with them, do some social stuff. And even if you're interviewing the, Lewis Hamilton, ask him about his dogs. Don't ask him what Netflix series he's watching. Ask him if he's watched Cobra Kai. Don't ask him what everyone else is asking him. Think differently. So definitely that's the number one tip. Like, think differently. Try and ask questions that will lead to content that can cut through the noise. Because there's a hell of a lot of noise out there now. There's millions of articles being published on the internet every day. Like, one of the big challenges we face, and it's not a challenge really, but we're set up, not only do we publish our articles on our own titles, we're plugged into Apple News, Yahoo, Google, Flipboard, Upday, News Now. So you're competing with all of these other big brands. So you have to have something different to say.
Of course.
A good example, which I think I've referenced, is Diego, from a sporting perspective. If when Diego Maradona passed away, Apple News now, all of a sudden everything filled up with just the bog standard story of the story that he's passed. Whereas we got loads of traffic to our Planet Football story, which we'd written previously, which was like the 19 best quotes about Maradona, featuring Liam Gallagher.
Lovely.
And,
Brilliant.
like just really different. And it stood out from the, all the headlines were the same, and then ours just stood out like a sore thumb.
It's very creative, isn't it? It's a creative bit of content that, and it's much more engaging. Music fans are going to access that. For example, pop culture fans are going to access that, and I think that's really interesting, and it's quite refreshing for me to hear that too. I think certainly when we do the sports entertainment stuff, a lot of the questions are based around who's been released, or sort of dirt in that way, and I think that's fine, but everybody's covering that. So you want personal stuff, how that person's feeling, how their their mental health is, any advice and support for people who have lost their jobs, and how people can connect to that. And I think that's really nice, because that works. Someone who lives in, I always say, you want to connect with someone who lives, say they live in, I don't know, York or something, and they're 40 years old. You want to find something that connects with them just as much as something that connects with an 18-year-old from Rome. Do you know what I mean? So if you can have that niche there, and find out what that is. Yeah.
And I think that transcends. Another tip that I'd say to students is be interested in everyone, not just
absolutely, yes,
not just the big names. Another example of that was we went to I took our boxing editor to a press conference for Josh Warrington, and Eddie Hearn was there, and everyone wanted to talk to Josh Warrington and Eddie Hearn, and they were put up on the stage and everyone was videoing it, and I was talking to Josh Warrington's driver and getting all sorts of stories out of him. And it was all like, I sort of said, look, it's all off the record. I'm just quite interested in who are you? Why are you here? And he was like, why are you talking to me? And I was like, well, I just think it's interesting.
Why not?
And he just, he was a person there. And we've actually had lots of really great interviews with, when Wimbledon comes around, we interview the umpire that, had a big argument with Federer and Nadal. We spoke to him. How was that? Like arguing with these greats of the game.
Yeah. And how much value will that give to that person as well? I think that's one of the things, certainly, I think if we can create value, not just for the people that have the platform, the millions of followers or whatever, we give them a platform, but they've already got one. But how much value is there when you can make somebody who, maybe just goes about their day, but if you can make them feel like they, that passion that you have, it's an amazing thing, and I really respect and admire your approach there. I think that's fantastic.
Well, I think for me, we're sports publishers, but you might not be interested in tennis, but even if you're not interested in tennis, you might see that and think, God, that's really interesting. I'm going to read that article because it's about an umpire that, do you know what I mean? It's just we try to create content and ask questions that isn't just of interest to a tennis fan. It's or a football fan. And even when we talk about football, Planet Football is our celebration of everything we love about football. So it's like, what clothes do you put on when you're getting ready to go to the football? What music do you listen to? When you're in the pub, what song do they play? We like to talk about how important sport is to the culture of society, because it is hugely important.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot of people. It's their release, isn't it? And it always has been way back. When for workers, way back when football first started, it was their release from a long week, and I think it's the same now, isn't it?
I think so, and I think some people miss out on that. So that Maradona example there, immediately that pricked my interest, because again, you're accessing there, and with the umpire stuff, you're accessing a whole other audience of people who are interested in pop culture, interested in people, interested in the culture around the sport and around the people that are platformed and given that pedestal. And I think that's a fascinating way. Certainly, I admire that a lot, and I think it's a really good way to do things, because again, it's about we have the power to make people feel special, make people feel valued, make them feel, cool, and rightly so. Some of the, the people you're platforming, the umpire there, the example, obviously the people talking about, I mean, the Maradona quotes is another example there, but, people deserve this platform, and they might not think
Yeah.
they do, but they do, I think that's really, there's something really special about that, for sure.
I was just going to reference, because I know we've been talking about our age and the time that we, when I went to university, I would say one of the most formative, creative things that I consumed was Train Spotting. I read the book, the Urban Welsh book, which blew my mind a little bit. But then when the film came out, and when I saw what the filmmakers had turned that book into, and the visuals of the poster, I had all the posters, the music that they used, the way they fused, drugs and football and going out with your mates and having girlfriend. It was just perfection. And I just, that really inspired me as a film, to see what was made from, that was Danny Boyle. That was not one person, but he had collaborators, but he was the one that was like, I'm going to take this source material and put my own stamp on it, and put Iggy Pop and go and pick some unknown actors that have gone on to be huge stars. And so, that was a huge sort of like, to see the creative process that must have gone behind that film. And when I watch movies and stuff now, I'm really thinking, God, think of the video editors, all these Marvel films and stuff, the music, in Marvel in particular, they use loads of old songs from the 60s. And my sons are like, that's my favorite song. And I'm like, this is The Chain by Fleetwood Mac. How do you know about this song? And he's like, it's at the start of, Guardians of the Galaxy.
That's it, man. That's it. Beautiful, isn't it? Beautiful stuff.
I love it.
Yeah, good. That again, that passion comes through. Listening to you talk about it, which is wonderful. I mean, like I said, before we sort of wind up now, I do want to ask you about one of the things that comes up quite a lot is success. Okay, so people look at you and they go, they look at you coming into a university, for example, and they go, I'm never gonna get to where Simon is. I'm never going to do that. And we work with a lot of people who struggle with some mental health issues, and they might be very creative and very, very interesting, but they can't find that value in themselves that we talked about just now. So I wanted to ask you personally how you define success, and has that changed, as you've gone through your career?
From a personal perspective, I think the successes that I achieve is that I'm interested in every single person. So, I've got a spreadsheet with 100 names on it, and I could tell you what uni they went to, if they've got a boyfriend, if they've got a girlfriend, if they've got sons, I literally know everything about them. And that is why my role is quite time consuming, because trying to keep those relationships alive from a work perspective, but they're kind of, that they work with us, but they're kind of friends as well. And it's just, I think if you can get someone to buy into the ethos of what you want to do, that's what's important. That's the success for me. Like, inspire the people. This is what I want to create. Do you want to come and be part of the journey? But then just have that value of get to know that one person, like individual. I think individual relationships is the way to go. And then from there you can build teams, because if I know that person, I'm like, right, well, actually, this brand is missing exactly you. So you are going to be amazing for this brand. And then so they're going into it with the confidence, like you say, belief. It's like building that belief in people, isn't it?
And you can help them build that belief. And I think that's a wonderful way. Personally, it's just an opinion. I'm one person, but I think that if you could spend your life helping people, find the belief that maybe somebody helped you get, or you helped yourself get even, I think that's a really worthwhile way to spend your days, personally.
Yeah, I love that. I do love that. I think it's more important than ever that people like us are going into universities and talking to students or young people who are living a life that we cannot relate to.
Absolutely.
That we could go out and get drunk at a nightclub and fall asleep on a curb because there was no one taking a picture of us and putting it on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. I'm not saying that happened, but it did.
No, it did. It did. Yeah. And there's, there wasn't Twitter and Facebook, but there wasn't Twitter, to the level it is now, where I think that's the thing. People do take pictures, and people did back then, but it was more I don't know. I'm trying to think of what I'm trying to say. It was less instant, is what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
People would literally put something up now, and it'll
yeah,
be there. You know, whereas I guess in the media, that's what I'm trying to say. The media, there was more thought that went into it. I think
yeah. I think
that's
so.
it. Whereas in social media now, it's very quick. It's like you could put something up, and then if you regret it, somebody might have
Yeah,
already screenshotted it. You know, that
yeah,
I see that a lot. I see that in a lot of articles and news stuff, whether I agree with it or not. People have screenshotted stuff that people have deleted. You know,
yeah.
so it's always there. You know, and
And I
that
do
forms a
think
news story. You know,
I went to see Cypress Hill in
oh
Leeds
nice,
because they were my seminal.
yeah, yeah,
Well, Black Sunday was one of my seminal like
yeah,
university albums. So to see them live was a real bucket list moment.
yeah, man.
But I just I couldn't comprehend the amount of people that were watching them perform through a Facebook Live.
Yeah,
They'd got their phone on in front of their face, recording it as a Facebook Live. Every bone in my body just wanted to walk up to them and just go, just put your phone in your pocket and just be in the
be
moment,
in the
just
moment.
take it in.
Yeah.
So, but that's the world. That is the world we
It,
kind of live in now. Really,
it is. I mean, yeah. I have to, because obviously we go to a lot of shows and stuff. I do certain amount of tweets and things, but I
yeah,
have to push myself to put the phone in the pocket. You know, even now, and I think it's important to do that. Like you say, I see it a lot, and I know a lot of bands and places now enforce it, and
yeah,
people find it really difficult to deal with. But you
yeah.
know,
I think it's good. I think it's a good thing, and I'm totally, if I'm at a sports event, then of course I'm going to have my phone out,
mm,
and I'm going to be taking video and pictures. But by and large, there's going to be a mix where the phone's in my pocket and I'm just talking to people.
yeah,
I did this. Just one last thing I want to tell you about just
of
how
course.
different we are. We were invited to a Yorkshire Media Day a couple of years ago, and Joe Root was there. So everyone, like normally just local people go to it, and Joe Root was there, and everyone was asking the same questions about the Ashes and blah, but all these established
Mm,
cricket writers were there, and I'm not really a cricket writer, but I took a young lad along with
mm,
me, and he was quite nervous, and I
mm,
was the opposite end of just not bored of these things, but just
mm.
trying to think
You've been
differently.
there. You've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually got my 11-year-old son, who's called Joe. I said, I'm doing this tomorrow. Will you write my questions that I'm going to ask all of the players?
Lovely.
And he was like, yeah. So he came up with a list of 6 questions, and it was like, who's your favorite superhero? Do you
Wow.
like sloths? Just completely random. Are you your parents' favorite?
Yeah.
All brilliant. And it was
But
great because,
fantastic questions. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, and I was asking all these players, like, and they were like properly answering them. They were
Mm.
like, yeah, I do like sloths. Sloths are great. They've got a great life. They hang around. And then we did tweets like breaking news, this Yorkshire player likes sloths, and then hashtag do you like sloths. So I've
Lovely.
embraced the new world as well.
Lovely.
But
That's playful as well, isn't it? It takes the pressure off, even though the work is being done, and
yeah,
you're building potentially viral content, because that
yeah,
stuff can go viral. It's entertaining.
yeah,
It
yeah.
takes the pressure off, I think, as well. And I think it's
I think
thinking
so.
outside the box, isn't it? It's thinking
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
which is what we're
Then
always taught.
of course that at some point we then asked them a couple of normal questions, and
Yeah.
then we wrote about Yorkshire, but that was at the bottom of our
Yeah.
piece that was all about he likes
Mm.
Iron Man because he's married to Gwyneth Paltrow, and why he's a billionaire. And then it was
Yeah.
like, oh, by the way, he thinks Yorkshire are going to win the county championships.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. But it just, again, it's more entertaining from a pop culture level. And I think what I've heard is, certainly with what you're doing with Planet Sport, obviously the sport focus is there, but there's also a degree of pop culture. There's also a degree where you can relate music to it, and music fans can. And obviously, I know there are some music platforms as well, and we'll talk about other platforms and things you've got on top of that as we finish up. But yeah, I really admire that, and I think it's fantastic, which is why I wanted to sit down with you today. But before we sort of do the press plugging bit, where you can plug all of the projects and things you've got coming up, what is your message? You mentioned that 100 person spreadsheet there. What is your message to family, friends, those young people that you've worked with, the people that have got behind you from the beginning of your career, and the people will of course continue to support you as you continue on in your career?
there's so many, but I've had lots of mentors, incredible people that have shaped me. One of the most influential things from my university, my 3 years at university, was a talk by the chap from PA Sport. You know, he came and did a talk a bit like I do at universities. I think they're so that's one thing going to university does, is it opens doors that will not be opened if you don't go to university. It's and I'm not a huge believer. I'm not standing here saying you have to have a degree to come and work for me, but you know, it will literally get you in front of me. I'm going around and I'm working in higher education, and so but you know, I worked for local newspapers, and so I've had editors that have sort of shaped me, and really just I think they've just seen something in me, and that's what I'm looking for now. And it is that X factor. It's that willingness to work hard, willingness to listen and take on board. That's one of my biggest bugbears, is if you have a student that submits something to, you know, if we kind of say, if you want to do a placement, write me an article. You've got complete creative freedom. Come up with some ideas, and then they either do, and they're brilliant ideas, or it ends because they don't want to make that effort. But yeah, just kind of like, you know, I would always say I'm looking for people that have got that kind of that all the same principles that we had when we were their age. You know, that's why we've got to where we are. We've had a successful career, not because we're amazing writers or anything, or because we've tried to do things the right way. Be a good person, and and kind of believe in yourself, and like, even if you don't feel confident, try and exude some confidence. You know, because if you're going in for a job and there's 100 other people, you know, if you're there and you haven't really got anything to say, I'm not going to remember you. Whereas CJAM was a brilliant event. You know, I ended up giving 5 people placements, and then 3 more placements to people that shouldn't have been there, the second years that shouldn't have been there, but they came up to me when we were milling around, and just, you know, and I'm like, that's what I would have done. I know that's what I'd have done. I'd have gate crashed that party and got in front of the person that I wanted to speak to.
Yeah, that's really interesting, taking that opportunity while and I think people, you know, at university, that's your time to do it as well. You know what I mean? To take that opportunity. So I think that's a great lesson there, and fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Simon. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. I could sit and talk to you for hours, but I know you're a busy man. Just as we finish, then, this is the press and plugging bit you can do. You know how this goes. So obviously it's planetsport.com. Obviously, I know some of the other resources you've got, but where do you want to direct people? Where do you want to tell people to go? What have you got coming up that you want to tell people about?
So so planetsport.com is one of our newest titles that we launched around a year ago, and it's kind of a stats-based content hub, live scores, really good content derived around stats and details, so very analytical content. But football365.com, everyone should go and read that. It's the brand that we say, you know, we tell you what to think about football. It's got that real swagger to it. Kind of like, have I got news for you kind of attitude. You know, we kind of call out what's being written in the tabloids, in Media Watch. And we've got, the football titles we've got teamtalk.com, which is my Cut Me and I Bleed Team Talk. It's all about transfer news. It's the site that I joined in 2001 and ran for 14 years. And then Planet Football is our celebration of why we love football. You know, so there's no news on there, there's no scores, there's no tables. It's just storytelling from great stories from around the globe. And the final plug would be for Planet F1, because that is currently our biggest website, our most lucrative website. And it's because we've always had a Formula One site, but then the Netflix series Drive to Survive has opened up the world of F1 to a brand new audience. Cool. I don't know if you've watched it. I would thoroughly recommend it. They've made F1 really accessible. You know, you can see the people that are inside the car. In F1, you don't see the people driving around at 300 miles an hour. Whereas now you see the little, and again, it goes back to, you see that person and you see their backstory. It's people. It's like, wow, I know who Esteban Ocon is now. He's this young kid that has had this tough upbringing. And it's fantastic.
That storytelling there is really important, I think. And that's a great message to finish up on. And Simon, thank you so much for your time today, mate. I really appreciate it. I look forward to meeting you again one day.
Yeah, let's meet
real
up for a beer.
Yeah.
I'll come over to Hull and you can take me out for a beer.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. See you soon, man. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Dom.